women feel, I just can't. And are you empathetic to them? Because we just had
empathetic.
Oh, good.
So this is what happens when you have the Women of the View talk to one of the most distinguished doctors in the world. Remember, Ben Carson is a doctor, or more specifically, a neurosurgeon. I may be reading Whoopi wrong here, but she seems to be playing an emotional argument against one of the greatest doctors in history. Now, instead of Whoopi taking on Ben Carson's argument of him saying there is no way that's just a bundle of cells, no, that's actually a baby, which means you can't kill it, Whoopi steers towards an emotional argument of, do you have any empathy for the people who have to make decisions to kill their baby? To which Dr. Carson responds accordingly.
Go ahead, sorry. Go
Very empathetic, and what I have said is that this is a job for us in the private sector. What we need to do is make sure that we provide adequate daycare centers for these mothers so that they can get their GED, their associate's degree, their bachelor's degree, their master's degree.
You're assuming that these are mothers who aren't educated. I mean, I'm talking about women who make that.
Of them.
I don't know that you can.
Let me tell you a fact. Let me tell you a fact. The fact is, a lot of those young girls who are having babies out of wedlock, when they have that first baby, they stop their education. And that child is 4 times as likely to grow up in poverty. We as a society have an obligation to do what's necessary to stop that cycle from occurring.
Did you notice the reeks from the crowd when Dr. Ben Carson actually points out this fact? There are so many studies on this. Here's just one from U.S. News saying that poverty and children born out of wedlock are absolutely connected. If you're a fan of my channel or a fan of Ben Shapiro or Ann Coulter, you should know that we all have mentioned this many times. The number one thing that will predict whether or not a child is a criminal, a failure, a success, a juvenile, whatever, is not the color of their skin or the way they talk or walk or even just poverty alone. It is being born into a single mother household. It turns out that kids need both a mother and a father. Who knew, right? Now, don't get me wrong, it's no different with a single father household, but there's a perpetuating cycle of single motherhood in the country. Now, let's look back on the video on what Ben Carson was saying. Ben Carson was addressing this point. He was only addressing this point because he was then going to say that society needs to take better care of these individuals and that the private sector could do a wonderful thing. But, of course, as you heard from the reeks in the crowd, there is very little opportunity to make the point of single motherhood like this without someone calling you a sexist or just reeking at you or saying you just hate women or something like that.
Important is birth control, then, to the Republican Party. They should be out there really applauding Planned Parenthood for supplying birth control, mammograms, and everything else. Why are they against Planned Parenthood?
Idiot Joy decides to make the false claim that is made by almost all Democratic leaders. Yes, Planned Parenthood supplies birth control. They generally only supply birth control because they know birth control is somewhat ineffective due to human error, as in women forget to take it at the same time every single day, which is what needs to be done for the effects to work. What happens if the birth control fails? They get pregnant again. Where do they go for their abortion? Planned Parenthood, of course. Now, something that upsets me the most about the Planned Parenthood argument. No, they do not supply mammograms, Joy. When Joy listens to her Democrat leaders like Bernie Sanders and even Barack Obama say this, she is utterly convinced that it is true. Yet, a simple Google search shows that they do not supply mammograms. This is just another leftist lunatic lie. Getting back to the overall point Joy made about Planned Parenthood, Republicans generally are against Planned Parenthood because not only do they not supply mammograms or prenatal care, they supply abortions. They are the abortion clinic of America. Republicans are generally against abortions. It's just that simple.
Are you against birth control, too?
I don't speak for the Republican Party. I speak for me.
Okay, for yourself. Are you against birth control also?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right. And so I guess you believe in daycare centers and maternity leave and food stamps and all the things that go along with raising a kid if you don't have the money. Here's what I believe in, because I get sick and tired of people, particularly progressives, saying Carson grew up poor. He must have benefited from government programs, and now he wants to withdraw all the programs from poor people. We do not assume
Wait a minute. I've heard that so many times. You've heard it too. It's a bunch of crap. And what I really actually want to do is provide people with a mechanism for coming out of a state of dependency and climbing the ladder and becoming part of the fabric of America.
This is a great thing.
We agree with that.
Really, Joy? You agree with that, Joy? Really? Maybe you do agree with that. You know what? Maybe you do. But you don't agree on how to get there. Also, I love the subtle punch in the face Carson made to progressives.
Yes, but I think my question... Actually, I'm going to let everybody else ask their questions. I don't
well, it takes me to Obamacare, because you said it's the worst thing that has happened in this nation since slavery. How is it slavery and over 9 million people have it?
Let me tell you why.
Why?
Because this is supposed to be a country that is of, for, and by the people. The government is supposed to be there to facilitate life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. With this particular act, the government comes along and says, don't care what you people think. This is what we're doing. We're cramming it down your throat, and if you don't like it, too bad.
Getting into the war.
Whoopi made the most popular leftist argument. I really felt the necessity to pause here just to remind you of how to combat this leftist argument. So let's review. Ben Carson points out how Obamacare is a disaster and how it doesn't advocate the principles of a free society, to which Whoopi responds with, kind of like getting into a war. For one, it depends on which war you're referring to, because war powers are granted to the United States government in the Constitution, obviously, and forcing people to buy health insurance is not granted to the United States government in the Constitution, obviously. But above all else, it's a complete avoidance of the argument. Ben Carson is destroying them on Obamacare. Instead of these leftist ladies of The View responding directly to Carson's argument, they completely avoid it altogether and start talking about something else that has absolutely nothing to do with Obamacare. Yes, we can agree certain wars were bad. Just because certain wars are bad doesn't mean that Obamacare is justified in any way, shape, or form. Simply put, one mistake does not justify the government to do another mistake.
That essentially shifts...
Because we did that. We've done that. That seems to be the way of the nation.
But it shifts the relationship between the people and the government. The people are supposed to be at the pinnacle. The government works for us. It's not the other way around. And we need to restore that.
Okay.
That's very important.
All right. Are we done?
Anybody else?
I just wanted to ask one last thing. I mean, you said that you don't necessarily relate to the Republicans, and you don't really say you're a Democrat either. So why do you feel this way?
I said I don't speak for the Republicans. I didn't say I didn't relate to them.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing.
Is there anything about the Republicans that you don't relate to?
Well, I am not a highly partisan person. The issues that affect us are imminent States Constitution, and the Second Amendment of that Constitution gives citizens the right to keep and bear arms. Therefore, anything that we're going to do has to be done with respect to the Second Amendment.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on now and talk about your standing in the polls. Because in this Fox poll that you're second behind Donald Trump. You're also in second in some key states like South Carolina, in Iowa as well. Why do you think you have suddenly taken off? You're, I don't want to say the new golden boy, because Donald Trump is leading, but you have certainly made a mark in the polls.
Well, I think it's because people are actually getting a chance to hear me. You know, before the first debate, half the people didn't even know who I was. And they've been doing their homework subsequently and actually getting a chance to hear from my own lips what I've said, as opposed to what others characterize me as saying, which are two completely different things.
Mm-hmm. We have been talking tonight about Donald Trump. We've been talking tonight about race, you know, the shooter as well, because he mentioned it. What is your, how do you think Donald Trump is dealing with the immigration issue, and how do you feel about the direction he has taken the political race?
Well, see, the wonderful thing about the political process that we have is that everybody gets to express themselves. And over the course of a period of time, some people complain that the period is too long, but over a significant period of time, you're able to see very clearly what kind of a person each one of us is. And the voters will then have an opportunity to choose the one that they feel is going to do the best job of leading this country.
I want to read something. This is from your op-ed that was in USA Today, and you said this about the Black Lives Matter movement. You said that they were focused on the wrong targets to the detriment of blacks, you said. And then here's what you write. You said, unjust treatment from police did not fill our inner cities with people who face growing hopelessness. Young men and women can't find jobs. Parents don't have the skills to compete in the modern job market. Far too many families are torn and tattered by self-inflicted wounds. Violence often walks alongside people who have given up hope. So you have said that anyone who questions the status quo on race gets called, like you, who happens to be a person of color, that they get called an Uncle Tom. So tell me what you think needs to be done to change things in this country.
Well, for one thing, we need to stop fighting each other. We need to stop getting in our respective corner and calling each other names and acting like third graders. Apologies to third graders. What we need to do is put on the table what our solutions are, all sides. And then, like intelligent people, discuss what the solutions are. Not so much pointing fingers at everybody, but let's ask ourselves, how do we resolve these issues? What are the things that are causing chronic hopelessness and unemployment in the black community?
And they are?
Well, many of the things are economic issues. For instance, we have the most powerful and dynamic economic engine that the world has ever known. But what do we do with it? We encircle it with all kinds of regulations. Now, what do regulations do? Every single regulation costs us money in terms of goods and services. This is not something you're going to hear from a lot of people. Right. And it costs poor people disproportionately more because they don't have as much cash. Yeah. Those are the kinds of things that really drive the disparity. It's not the rich people. You can take all the money from the top 1% and apply it to these problems, and you're still going to have the problems. We have to actually deal with the fundamentals.
I want to play something that, because I was particularly struck by one of your recent trip to Harlem, and where you said this. Take a listen.
Whether I get the votes or not, I want people to start listening to what I'm saying and understanding that, you know, there's a way to go that will lead to upward mobility as opposed to dependency. And let's talk about that way, and let's not be satisfied to be patted on the head and kept like a pet.
So I'm assuming there that you're talking about the Democratic Party, right, taking black votes for granted. Do you think the Republican Party offers a better alternative, and how do you think the GOP can help?
Well, I don't know about the Republican Party. I know what I am going to be advocating. I'm going to be advocating that people invest in people. Business, industry, Wall Street, academia, churches, community groups. We have to take interest in the people around us. Those are the programs that work, that I've seen that work. The government programs have thrown money at poverty since the mid-'60s, $19 trillion, and we have 10 times more people on